everyone. We'll welcome to the Get Ready for the Rebound event. Please bear with us for a couple of moments just while we wait for this session to load on everyone's computer. So just sit tight for a second and we'll get underway. All right, everyone. Well, welcome, as I said, to the Get Ready for the Rebound event. This is an exciting an event this evening where we will be discussing the opportunities and trends in the event management sector in the post-COVID-19 world to ensure that you are ready to capitalize on this global pandemic, but also so you can see some light, hopefully, at the end of this tunnel after this hour of discussion. My name is Phil Watson and I will be your host for this evening, and I'm the Associate Vice President of Domestic Development here at the International College of Management Sydney, or more fondly known as ICMS, or the Castle on the Hill. And this evening we'll be hearing from a range of panel experts who have a comprehensive background of multiple industry disciplines. Our panel members are highly regarded academics, but they also importantly have an extensive career behind them, both previously and also currently in the global event management world. So I suppose firstly, just to give you a bit of a rundown of how we will be proceeding this evening. Firstly, we will hear from Mr. William O'Toole, who has an extensive experience in the festival and special events management space, the feasibility of events, and also security and crowd management, sorry. Then after William, we'll hear from our international venue director and experiential events expert, Katrina Danu. And then our final panel member this evening is Dr. Alexander Roper, who has a distinguished background in both playing sport at a professional level throughout Europe, but has also regularly advised both national sporting and event policy globally. And then finally this evening, everyone, we will have a Q&A session with all of our panel members based on the questions that you're sending through. So please make sure you submit your questions as we go this evening. And look, if we do not have time for all of the questions, you can check back in our website later for all the answers, and we will also be emailing them through to you with responses from our panel members. Just so you know, my background as well, I do have a background in the sporting event landscape as well. I used to work at Football Federation Australia. I've been part of the team management group of the Socceroos, and I've also organised and run football matches on behalf of the Asian Football Confederation, which were broadcast to over 1 billion people globally. So I can tell you from experience that these three panel members that we have with us this evening bring an up-to-date and powerful perspective to you. So I think with that, it's probably best to get started. And I would like to introduce to you our first panelist for this evening, Mr. William O'Toole. William has written 5 internationally distributed event management textbooks that include things such as festivals and special event management, event project management, event feasibility from strategy to operations, and also crowd management, security, risk and health. So Mr. William O'Toole, I'd like to hand over to you to get us underway. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about now is what's been happening over the last couple of months. And I've been in touch with people all around the world on this. I work with the IFEA, the International Festival Events Association, and I also work in Europe, and the Middle East, of course. And I think there's a lot we can learn from this. And when we learn it, we can be better as a result of this. So let's just start off with looking at what the situation is. It's been highly confusing. I've got a mathematics background, so I was actually very interested in the probability analysis and what was happening with regard to the COVID-19. And then seeing that all these terrible headlines that everything's on the brink, it's all disaster. And you could see some of these, the biggest supplier companies in the world, like Live Nation, that supplies entertainment to events around the world, was going bankrupt. So it was a terrible situation for these major events and these major companies. And what's been happening now, as you know, it's all sort of starting to open up again. And you're getting quite interesting things happening. This one's quite interesting because rather than having these huge events with 100,000 people, the music industry has realized that they could actually have 1,000 gigs with a lot less people and have distributed events around New South Wales. So that's what they're getting ready for. Also, what's happening just yesterday is that West Australia is starting to ease the restrictions. And you can see down the bottom here that major events are going to start occurring over there. Okay, so that's the situation. Now, a lot of people around the world were working on this, as you can imagine, and a friend of mine put this together that went around the world to events. I can send you a copy of this if you send me an email. It's quite interesting. What's important across here, obviously, is the schedule. It's all about scheduling. It's all about times and deadlines with regard to when we open up. Okay, so what do I take away from all of this? Well, firstly, it's the mega events that the ones that were really had the hardest time. We all know that most events around the world were just were cancelled, but the mega events really had a hard time. And by that, I mean the Olympics, the Grand Prix, the Vivid, all the rest of them, the ones that were getting 1 million people. Now, why? These big events are fairly recent, actually, although there are big events in history, but having them so often around the world is fairly recent. And the reason for that is that there's been a long period after the Second World War of social and economic stability around the world. And that's enabled these events to get together, and particularly in the last 30 years, because their planning timeline is in years, okay? And what's happened with international logistics is they're able to get people, suppliers, all the rest of them from anywhere in the world, basically. And what they used was what's called just in time, okay, meaning that they would get things in and then get them out again. Now, this left them be highly exposed to a major risk. The final thing that really caused the big problem was a lot of these events, the bigger the events, are highly geared, meaning they're in debt. And that's how they actually did their business. Like Live Nation was highly geared as well. And the result was that they were very fragile. Okay, that's what it's fragility, meaning that they were susceptible to major risk, to catastrophic risk, or what we call emergent risk. These are risks that you cannot predict, and COVID is a good example of it. It just came out from nowhere. And the result is that they could lose the profit or the surplus or the goodwill or whatever that they got over the last number of years, just from one major incident or disaster. And that's what fragility is, and hence the dinosaur down the bottom there. So let's have a look at what other event companies are doing. Now, the event industry is not made up of major events. That's just part of it. We tend to think of it. We tend to look at the huge events as what the event is. That's not the event industry. That's just one part. The event industry is actually made up of millions of small festivals and events all around the world. The weddings. So I used to have an event company for about 30 years, and we did concerts and weddings and conferences, community. In other words, we were diverse in our events. That's what we did, a variety of different events, which meant that we were ready for opportunities. Anything that came up, we were agile, we're able to grab an opportunity that came up. Now, these huge events can't do that, right? They're like a huge ocean liner. They just cannot turn. Whereas the smaller events and the smaller event companies can. And what I'm saying is that these are the things that will come back first. The smaller events, the smaller event companies. Now, the question is whether the dinosaurs will die and just die off. And it will be the smaller event companies that will now grow. So that might be a big opportunity for a lot of people. Okay. Now, they're not debt driven. This is the point. When a lot of these companies put money aside for when there's a problem. They were used to risk, whereas the bigger events never did that. Like I said, they were highly geared and they did do things like that. So they laid off massive staff numbers, whereas the smaller event companies actually use the time for training their staff. And you'll find that in, let's say, the local councils, for example. They have events people in councils. So they use the time to train their staff in risk, in innovation. They optimize their management processes. They had a look at the policy of what they were doing, the sort of events that they were doing, and they rationalized it all. They went through everything. So rather than seeing this as the disaster that it's seen as major events, the smaller companies and the smaller events actually, and this is right around the world. Like I said, I was talking to the Americans and Europeans and in the Middle East. They're using these times to actually become more optimized, is a word for it. But in other words, come back much better and much stronger in the next couple of months. And I think that's what you'll see. They look for opportunity, and obviously the hybrid events, for example, the drive-ins that's had a huge increase all around the States, for an example of that. So what do we learn from this? Well, basically what the smaller events knew was it's about situational awareness. Now, these are some of the things that we teach actually in our risk management courses for events at ICMS, by the way. Understand situational awareness, understand immediate knowledge, and the need for dynamic analysis. In other words, the need to be agile. And that's the thing I want you to take away from this session. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, William. That was very insightful. I think particularly your point around how the distributed event model has changed from an event of 10,000 and now you might have 100 events of a small number. That's quite good. And I think hopefully that's a good sign for job prospects in this sector moving forward. More events means more jobs. So that's a great insight. Thank you. I look forward to maybe getting some more on that in the Q&A. We'll see what comes through the questions. I would now like to move to our second panelist for this evening, Ms. Katrina Danu. She's a tourism and health practitioner, experiential corporate events expert, and also an international venue director. So Katrina, over to you. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you for the introduction and welcome everyone. I'll just get my screen share up. Okay, so yes, my name is Katrina Danu. I've done a lot of research in wellness tourism and the experience economy. I also put that into practice in regards to an international venue over in Europe, which we have operated 14 years ago when we founded it. And as well as being a long-term lecturer and academic in the experience economy and wellness tourism perspective. So where are we compared to, let's say, February, which is when some of the last major events were on? For example, Firefight Australia was late February, actually into March. You also had the AIM event industry trade show that happened, and then only a week or so later, potentially the Formula One of Melbourne, which on that very weekend was shut down. How have we felt since then? We've had the uncertainty and the risk, not so much a personal risk, but also a professional risk, okay? So we started off thinking, oh, we won't get it. Actually, maybe we could get coronavirus, and oh my goodness, now how is our business going, or how is the company that I'm employed for going? So there's been this uncertainty and risk. The Global Exhibitions Day came in a couple of months after that, which was on the 3rd of June, and they demonstrated an excellent hybrid event where they actually did a virtual webinar and had some fantastic industry speakers. And they were talking about empowering to apply confidence and trust. And this is what we operate at. The panel that's here today, we've all concurred that these processes and these structures are by far what needs to go through in regards to operations and empowerment into the events industry. So we're going to be looking at a few of those channels today. Bill's already talked about a few. I'll be looking at a few from the wellness and attendee perspective, as well as the technology platforms and how our attendees or our delegates in business terms can identify with them. So yes, hybrid innovation. For anyone that's been sitting in some fantastic industry webinars and looking at the research behind it and looking at case studies of these emerging platforms, let's look at it not from that technology perspective, but from the user perspective, from that attendee, okay? The attendees are people, they're humans. And guess what? we're going to be socially distancing for a while yet, and we've got this self-preservation about us now that is unique. Many of us may not have had that feeling before, of feeling quite mortal and feeling a little fragile. So the psychological landscape of social distancing is going to be with us for a long time yet. That's where hybrid events come in. It gives that maximization of these two different platforms for our attendees to engage with each other, a peer-to-peer engagement platform, but also the other major stakeholders such as sponsors. So what does the hybrid innovation give on not just that day? It actually gives this halo effect, which has been spoken about in industry. It's this emerging effect where the halo, meaning the circle of life of this one event that may have only been a day conference or a day event. If it was a residential, maybe 2 or 3 days. If it's a conference or an association, continuing professional development conference. But we can now optimize this and going into a 6 to 8 week halo effect, where at the very instance when that user or that attendee first arrives on that website, there's the empowering relationship happening from that very start. Then you go through, you educate, then there's a face-to-face event, and then followed up again with that virtual relationship with opportunities to monetize through sponsorship. So it's like a new mitochondria of the event industry, using these virtual tools to humanize these events. We're looking at the digital marketing, the pre-event, the post-event, and the event itself. How do you continually to virtually engage? And in marketing terms, delight the attendee, engage throughout all sections of that. We're looking at the new digital tools. Now, there is many platforms that have been cropping up, which is so exciting to see. And some fantastic virtual tools such as the end-to-end webinar platforms. There's been some fantastic international examples of existing companies such as EventSair launching their on-air end-to-end conferencing platform. So a highly interactive platform there alongside the very comprehensive event planning and staging software behind that. You also have the most amazing Australian companies, in fact, who are doing these end-to-end webinar platforms as well that have just been launched. So there's many different budget options and many different widget options within each of these modules that you can add on into each of the systems. So you can choose which would be the right scope for your event or your company that they could afford. Looking at the experience, the attendee experience, okay? They want to network with the other attendees, their peers. They also want to prospect with the exhibitors. The exhibitors want to prospect them. So how do we do this? How do we apply this in a virtual or a hybrid event? We use gamification. We use online networking. We use virtual exhibition halls. And the polling nature. And I was just sitting on a webinar this morning through the Cannes Lions Creative Global Congress, which is normally near where our venue is over in France. And we are the host providers for that. And normally it's a face-to-face event across the other side of the world. Currently, it's a week's amazing virtual event and they're polling all the time and it's really good fun. A lot of gamification and networking happening as well. So bonus there, okay, the upsell is the fact that you're attracting the buyer and the seller together in a virtual platform over this halo effect duration. There's 6 to 8 weeks of potential. It's a fantastic potential there. And the fact that the major stakeholders receive the data of the attendees. Let's apply this now into the existing, especially business events landscape here in Australia. So at the moment, we're state by state and we're strengthening within our state, which is really exciting. Yep, the case study of Western Australia and how it's had its success in being able to open up soon to large major events. Hopefully the other states won't be too far behind that. But let's look at how we can optimize this hybrid technology and our vulnerability and our self-preservation psychology of our attendees. How can we make them feel well and feel safe and enjoy We've all got a bit of nostalgia by previously loving being at large events. That's why we're in the event and tourism industry. How can we see what this is going to look like? So I've just got here the traditional business events value pyramid, okay, and it shows you the delegate expenditure and the local, the non-delegate expenditure, and then the indirect impact of business events. What factors are we going to have to look at enabling, okay, and changing? How are we going to model destination management? So yes, we're looking at smaller scale events and distributing them, more of them, distributed around a state or distributed around a country, an actual nation, such as more of a roadshow effect. This is great, and in fact, it reduces travel times for your attendees, and they can get optimum engagement with a more local cohort there. We've got the emerging role of these hybrid events affecting the pyramid expenditure, in that some attendees will choose to remain online, so therefore the destination may not reap the rewards, the host community, in regards to that spend there, but how can they potentially be optimized in some sort of sponsorship arrangements there? Okay, so actually getting their name over to those international hybrid attendees who may not have actually had the exposure at all because it was just too far for them to get to. Another thing about looking into the biosafety and wellness measures, the duty of care we have for our attendees is absolutely paramount. And coming in from an international health industry for the last 20 years or so, it's something that I'm particularly passionate about. I think all suppliers and all stakeholders should share the risk and responsibility to ensure that any one of those attendees, as well as any one of those employees or any of the stakeholders, have the optimum wellness measures. And of course, you have the risk management, other areas, contingency planning, revised contracts, but these are all opportunities to take the event sector into a new horizon. So what does our business event sector look like here in Australia? These are the stats. So it's very much into the healthcare, social assistance, scientific and technical services. This is where we absolutely shine in business events here in Australia. And guess what? It's going to be those industries that will reap rewards from those conferences still happening here in Australia, because we will be able to really optimize that knowledge transfer between peer-to-peer engagement, having those thought leaders talking together in a domestic situation, in a domestic environment, and new leaders from our great nation here will be emerged into a global platform. So looking at those, and those are also the large sectors where associations events are in. So the healthcare, scientific, technical, legal, engineering, etc., etc. These ones that we do so well in will continue forward. And in fact, we may end up being the global leaders in delivering events in these business sectors. And just at the bottom, you can see how much it actually contributes to the Australian economy. And look, hopefully soon we'll be back there as well. Okay, a couple of last points. This was done by Event MB a little while ago, last year. It shows you where risk sits. It was down at number 20. Do you think that's still the case? I really do believe that risk management and attendee wellness and engagement, which is not on this at all, this is going to be up in the top 5. So having industry experts talking about this and looking at the new trends and constantly watching what's happening in industry and making sure that your staff and that yourself are upskilled in these areas are going to be highly, highly, highly important, because this is what the jobs and seek.com.au and global portfolios will be looking for as well. Here we go. Like I said, we've got these event frameworks back from the Global Exhibitions Day when they were first talked about, and we've looked into that. And again, just applying these for optimum event attendee wellness. It's because we want our attendees to have the best experience possible. Okay, there's this self-preservation and these wellness measures and this feeling of, being mortal, but we're looking forward, and we do have nostalgia, and we're going to be finding comfort in this historical precedent where this Goldman Sachs article talks about after something as significant as this event, we do want to get out and live life to the fullest, but it'll take us a while. So we need to expect that gradual resurrection, but keeping in mind, keeping our attendees well and having a fantastic experience. The experience economy is really, really, really important. Bring that in with the hybrid experience, and you'll have a fantastic data collection for the major stakeholders as well as the attendees, being able to experience human connections again, meaningful connections, and feeling safe within those connections. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katrina. That was very interesting and some quite insightful moments there as well. And I can see we've had a few questions on the question functionality down here, so we'll hopefully get to those in the Q&A session. But I think your point about the halo effect to me provided that there's a potential in this industry, and potential means relief and a bit of hope, which is the great thing to see. So I'm glad you pointed that out. So thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. Our third panelist this evening is Dr. Alexander Roper, who is our sports events expert this evening. Dr. Roper has studied and also played sport himself, has a passion which started very early on in life, and saw him representing his home city of Liverpool and his state of Merseyside across a number of sporting disciplines. Any EPL fans out there, please don't hold it against him that I'm assuming he's a Liverpool fan, but he has his year of glory this year, so that we can give it to him for the first time in 30 years. But importantly, he's then moved on into a consultancy space to provide many organisations around the world with government policy advice in many areas. He is also now our Associate Dean of Postgraduate Studies here at ICMS. So I would like to hand over the floor now to Dr. Roper for our sports insight.
Thanks very much, Phil, and welcome to everyone. Yeah, I played sports quite well, but obviously a long time ago. Looking at myself in the camera now. A very warm welcome to everyone. Hopefully you'll enjoy this. A little bit of a different track to the two previous ones. I've got a way cut out to be anywhere near as good as those, but let's start. So here's the title here, and here's what we usually see. Now, historically, sport has been a major part of Western civilization, and it's played a huge cultural role. For the ancient Greeks, the perfect human was the embodiment of brain and brawn. And indeed, that's why the Olympics were actually first devised, to honor its use through sporting prowess. The Greeks believed in all-round athletes, whereas for the Romans, it was about excelling in one particular area, about being professional. And gladiatorial games marked the first events where all people could watch. In ancient Greece, it was only males, and then only those with wealth and standing who could attend. Women and poor people were not allowed to attend. In Rome, though, the plebs or commoners could attend, male and females could attend. And the reason for that was because the games were geared towards marketing to politicians who wanted to make people happy, where the phrase bread and circuses comes from. And so the idea is if you keep the people happy, then you've got more chance of them voting for you. So that's what it was used for. So again, even a long, long time ago, we have events used in very intelligent ways for lots and lots of people. Moving to the Middle Ages, and football was so popular in England that successive monarchs actually tried to make it illegal. That was to little avail, as we can see by the codification of the different codes throughout the world. And even a stay in jail proved not to be too much of a deterrent. Moving forward even further, and the passion that people have for sport and the potential that sport events can provide was not lost to National Socialist Germany, for example. We saw choose the 1936 Berlin Olympics to promote their country and their system to the watching world. And different times and messages, obviously, but this promotion of a preferred positive image remains the main reason for the staging of large-scale events today. Whilst war between Germany and the Axis powers and the Allies would materialize, war between the Warsaw Pact and NATO countries thankfully did not, at least not in conventional terms. The Cold War, however, was played out over very many Olympics. It was very much Orwell's famous definition of sport, war without the bullets, and it reached its zenith with Moscow in 1980 and LA in 1984. Sport can be divisive for sure. We all have our sides and many reasons for why we are better than them. It can also bring people together. From the trenches of the Western Front in 1914 and the famous Christmas Eve truce, which saw English and German combatants playing a game of football in no man's land, To events close to home, it can show us heroes. It can offer hope and a new beginning. It can speak out against injustices. It can say maybe we need a new approach to how things are now too. It can inspire and forge united overarching identity. For me, it's given me some of the greatest experiences of my life, some of the best times I've had around sport. It's given me some of my most treasured memories, but it's also provided some of the most worst experiences and memories I could have. Waiting for friends to return from a football match that so many did not. Sport matters, and it matters very much and to very many people, and it has done for a millennia. It's why we have scenes such as these and these. It brings people out in their droves, whether that be in person or televised around the globe, or at least that's what it used to be like. Compare this picture with this. Things have changed. It's a little bit embarrassing, but I was generally at a loss. My weekends devoid of the one thing that was a constant throughout my life, which is watching my football team. So my weekends were at a bit of a, I don't know, I have a bit of a loss for what to do. Again, it means that much to me, and it means that much to lots of different people. It's been confronting, almost unbelievable. Of course, we will return to normal. The 100-person cap on all indoor gatherings has been scrapped, and very soon crowds up to 10,000 people will be allowed at stadiums. In terms of the risks around stadiums and gatherings, the government has been very clear. As of today, we can have 20 people in public gathering and public places, 20-person limits on visitors to home, 20 people at weddings, and 50 people at religious services. Exemptions have been made for sport, as you can see on this slide. A further nod, I think, to how significant a cultural, political, and financial impact sport has. So whilst not back to how things were pre-COVID, there are very clear signs once more that things are returning back to some form of normalcy. There is some light at the end of the tunnel, as Phil mentioned before. What next would seem to be an obvious and a pertinent question. For those involved in sport, this will come as no surprise. But within that, we need to be aware that due to the different priorities of different key stakeholders, risk management can be extremely difficult. Was the rush to see sport, for example, was that prioritization of money over health? We all have our views on that, but irrespective of the answer, it would appear that because of directives around COVID-19, because they've been top down from the government, and in no small part due to the realization that this was very serious, things have been very well managed around sports here in Australia, and that's allowed us to be where we are today. Again, though, this is key. Going forward, it is vital we remain aware of the existence of different priorities, of the often conflicting goals and aspirations different people have, and the very real potential risks bring. With the Hillsborough disaster and numerous other stadium disasters around the world, it's been the prioritization of money over safety and a focus on crowd control rather than crowd safety that has resulted in significant losses of life, and that must not happen. Australia, thankfully, has an enviable record for stadium management, but again, there's no room for complacency. The need to remain risk aware and to prioritize safety above all else is key as restrictions loosen. So what can we do? Well, I would suggest that because of the risk posed by having so many people gathered in one space, social distancing will remain a necessity for the foreseeable future, with crowd sizes, irrespective of financial implications, managed to allow this. I would also not be surprised if rules came into place. They can get mandatory for everyone to wear face masks and for mandatory temperature monitoring prior to entry to take place. We've also seen some increases very lately in COVID numbers in Victoria, and of course that means the issue of a second wave and what that might mean. Whilst there is much conflicting information, I would hope that lessons have been learned from the first wave, and now different countries around the world are much better prepared. The sports industry, and indeed different industries and the economy more generally, this occurrence can be very serious. So how do we prepare? Well, of course, it may not even happen, but let's remember to talk about risk here. We wouldn't waste time worrying. That's a bad thing to do, but we should certainly prepare for all eventualities. Of course, as Bill mentioned, this is extremely difficult. COVID-19 took, if not all of us, most of us by surprise, and we may well find ourselves, going forward once more in uncharted waters. But there are certain things that we can do. We can ensure we show resilience and stay calm. We can show that we are adaptable. We show that we are able to critically think and problem solve. That we're decisive, confident, and take the required action. For sport events post-COVID-19, teams could find new ways to display sponsors' messages, such as virtual signs in the stands where the crowds normally are. Fans might buy tickets, which puts them in the ground virtually, able to follow events as if they were really there, but from the comfort of home. And maybe even a renewed focus on corporate boxes, given the easing restrictions of people 20 and under, could be a useful stopgap. Of course, there are many more areas than just these 3 examples, and I would have a lot more to do than explore these further, but obviously my time is limited. I'm going to end here, and I hope you've enjoyed some of the areas discussed. I'd like to thank you very much for your time and attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roper. That was a fantastic presentation. I think the important thing for me there was that sport is a very powerful vehicle for change, emotion, and a connection across society, regardless of where you come from. I think sport is one of the true things in life. It is a universal language. It kind of speaks to everyone. So that's fantastic. Thank you very much. And
sorry, Phil. That's exactly right. It's massively important, which was the message, but not as important as life. And I love sport, but yeah. We've got to be patient. That's right.
That's right. Well, that wraps up the presentations from each of our panelists this evening, and they were all fantastic. So thank you very much, each for your time respectively. But we have had a few questions here come through, which I'm trying to kind of collate as you guys have been going. So we have a little bit of time left. So I'd actually like to ask each of you some questions here from the group, if you have a moment to do that. So one of the questions that has come through from, it looks like from Ben, actually. I might start this one with William. He says here, so if you could summarize really essentially what your one piece of key advice for someone in this industry right now, so for the next 6 to 12 months, what would be the one key aspect to focus on, do you believe?
Boom. Okay. How do you forecast for things like this? Look, I can only tell you what I feel. I'm optimistic. I'm definitely not pessimistic about this. I think this is sort of this is the big churn in an industry. It happened with the global financial crisis, although the governments helped all those people out, but this is part of the big churn. So my advice is to look around for opportunities, not to be dragged down by the pessimism of it all. I think there's massive opportunities at this point in time. I think there's going to be big changes that are going to happen to the event industry. So if you're coming into the industry, okay, I would definitely look around for smaller events and volunteer for things like that. Have a look for smaller companies, get ready for when they come back on board. Rather than waiting for the next, Vivid Festival or something like that, go for the smaller ones and get that experience that's necessary.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that, for William. Katrina or Dr. Roper, do you have anything to add? I think William's point there about sort of short, sharp, looking for the short term is the immediate step for everyone. Do you have anything to maybe add to that at this stage?
Look, I think the landscape is changing very, very quickly. As we all know, each week there's new restrictions and widening of our horizons again. I mean, just today we've heard here domestically that Qantas is, has put in sustainability measures by standing down more staff and unfortunately letting go of quite a few. But that's because they understand that they need to have that balanced, measuring in place for when things do pick up in hopefully a year's time for the international sector. But as they said, their domestic sector is actually getting extremely strong again. So I think we're going to be going so fast, so quickly, and be strong and have faith in the domestic strength of our events. There's already so many government funds that are coming through. Another one that was announced today for the arts and culture sector, 75 million just on grants alone as part of a 250 million package for that culture and arts and music scene, which is fantastic. Overseas, we have the UK today has just opened up their borders for the European summer travel to 9 of the major EU countries. Now that is enormous. So like I said, it's going to be changing so quickly. But absolutely go small, because as you go there and you'll have that, the opportunity into a smaller event to really ensure that you have upskilled and you've really honed our new wellness measures and new risk management opportunities in place, and then take it from there.
Yeah, fantastic. And Dr. Roper, we've actually had quite a few questions here around the sporting element of the events industry, but obviously open to all panelists. The sort of the common theme here, there's been quite a few actually for sport. Looking at things like the upcoming Olympics, or even longer term, 2023 and on, those sort of events, they're still a while away in theory, but what do you believe will be the impacts of COVID on those events? Will they be a real concern at that point in time? Will businesses sort of change their practices so substantially by that point that it'll be common business practice, or will we kind of be back to business as usual, do you think?
I think back to business. I think the people that affect the most is the athletes, because obviously they train specifically for a certain period for competition, and they would have been out of competition and found it difficult to get those events that they need to participate in to get their performances better. Obviously, with there being time, Tokyo disappointed me, because the decision I think it was obvious to everyone that they had to go back, and the decision that took too long, I think. Birmingham should be fine, I think. I'm fairly buoyant about how things will be. I think things will get back to normal. I think people in that industry are very resilient, very smart. And so I think in terms of business-wise, I can't see any issues really. I think sponsors will be all over it again, because it's huge events. It's the athletes, but again, everyone's in the same boat. So I don't think it'll affect people's interest in watching it at all, if that helps answer the question, sorry.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Obviously, a great sign to see that you think that. And Katrina, with your background in the international venue space and your tourism background, do you think that the corporate sector will respond positively to the sporting landscape by 2022, 23? Do you think that will be back to relatively full strength?
Absolutely, 2022, 23, absolutely. We've even got, for example, big corporate regattas at the moment along the Mediterranean coast, which are still running ahead, but with various measures put in place. The dates still aren't set. They're working with different countries and different border openings. And look, who knows whether the whole, vaccine versus company policies letting their employees travel to a corporate event as such, whether it's a sporting event or a business event. It'll be left to see whether the worldwide economy is buoyant enough to continue on without that, vaccine-led policy there. But definitely in Europe, it looks like there's already movement there where like I said, the UK is letting their all of their residents move into the EU for some well-deserved sun and sporting and leisure. So I think we're going to be back to normal as soon as possible, whether that's for the better or for the worse, for transmission and our own health and wellness. But I think it's everything in moderation, and everyone has to, do their own risk assessment on their own personal health and their destination that they're heading to.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose it's also a personal element to it, whether you're comfortable in that regard. So yeah, that's a good point. William, you touched upon before sort of the short term in terms of maybe getting your career up and running over this period, some short-term changes. We've actually had a question specifically for you from Lena, which is if you have any advice on how to transition to that sort of music and live entertainment or festival industry, specifically currently in the wedding space. And obviously that's quite slow at the moment. Do you have any specific advice for people?
Sure.
In that?
The great thing about music and those sort of things is it doesn't have to be big to make money. It doesn't have to be huge. You don't have to get 100,000 people to actually do very well in music. So don't try to aim for something really big. Start off small. I mean, a concert for 200 people can easily do you very well if you do those like we used to do them about once a month or 2 times a month. When you get into that sort of area, you don't need to go big. It's a mistake for people coming into the industry to think that they've got to get a job in it. Remember, all these events were started by somebody. You know, somebody actually sat there and said, we will have a garage sale, or we'll have sculpture by the sea, or we'll do those things. That's what I want to see from people. They don't have to fit into a jigsaw that's there. Come on, use your creativity, use your interest, use your hobbies. That's the best thing, because that's what you love. And really, you can't run events unless you actually love the topic. Okay, so pick your hobbies and things like that. And if you really like music, then you'll get into it and you'll work. And it's not a 9-to-5 job events by any means, you know. You'll be working flat out for a long time, and then the next week you'll be doing nothing and wondering, you know, what's happening. So you've got to get used to things like that. So that's what I would say. I think it's a good idea. I think there's a lot of opportunities at present in the music industry, live music industry. Now's the time to find out about it. Now's the time to research it, have a look around.
Yeah, fantastic. And as you touched upon in your presentation, that turning major events or mega events into sort of smaller events, that sounds like an opportunity there as well.
Well, it's what it used to be. Remember, sport used to be just you guys running around a field kicking a ball, right? And now it's become, there's, you know, 200,000 people watching it. When did that happen?
I mean, it still is. I play football and I think I should be playing pro, but I'm not. So.
Well, I tried to start a thing called street soccer in Saudi Arabia, you know, where it's just people who play soccer on the street, you know, and getting it back to that micro level again, which is what events are. Remember, your big sport is based on that micro level.
Yeah, that's true. Katrina or Dr. Roper, anything to add to that? Any sort of insight you have either as well?
Yeah, actually talking about the sports, so for example, Formula One, their virtual racing has gone absolutely gangbusters. They've created a whole new demographic of fans in through watching their virtual races. So good on them for doing that and taking that on. Absolutely. So that's worked extremely well. And I think in regards to the events industry and where I come in for more, which is more the, you know, having been in the corporate event side, whether it's been as attendees for, you know, continuing professional development or exhibiting or representing or speaking or helping organise professional events and business events. Your spaces, I think everywhere, there's a huge opportunity for anyone who's got any form of entrepreneurial streak in them.
Yeah,
the hybrid event space and the production event space. Just team up with a production company, team up with a caterer, and team up with a venue that has a spare, fairly large room that can actually hold a live audience, live attendees, and you set up these new event spaces which are hybrid. There's been 2 that have just been launched in the last few weeks. One in the Museum of Contemporary Art in Circular Quay, and another one with the Australian Maritime Museum called Wharf 7, just, you know, near the southern pylon of the Harbour Bridge. Fantastic opportunities. There are so many things to do, and therefore you have a live event space with this conferencing element, this live room element. So, and you don't have to be a master in each of those trades. You can be a master in none of those trades, but it's all about collaboration and finding some great other entrepreneurs who are willing to, you know, to work all hours as we do in this industry and make it happen. There's some fantastic opportunities out there.
Every disaster does this. If you look at history, anywhere, all through history, major disasters like the COVID has opened up enormous opportunities if you're able to think through them and get through them rather than being immersed or oppressed by the risk and looking at the headlines and things like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you touched upon that, William, in your presentation. The headlines all very negative and very...
It's the way to sell papers.
That's right, way to sell a paper. So one other common question here, which seems to be coming through from the participants tonight is I suppose the soft skills, particularly to focus on during this period and sort of post-COVID and even during COVID. What soft skills do you believe are the most important to focus on, and how do you go about getting those skills?
I could respond to that in the fact that I think watching good quality webinars and understanding the attendee engagement on a virtual, while we still are sitting, you know, in your home environment or a very restricted social environment, use that time to educate yourself and upskill, and also see how you are as an attendee, what irks you and what has inspired you, and then take that forward, record it, and then do it better once you start delivering those events, whether it's in the sports, business, festival, music sector. You'd have to think of us coming out into the environment as fairly fragile humans, and we just need to ensure that everyone, everyone feels well and feels included. So I think soft skills there is being familiar with how we feel as a captive audience. And also ensuring what we can use in regards to whether it's technology or whether it's an event space or a community space, and how we can ensure that everyone feels comfortable there.
I suppose essentially we've all been customers in an event as well, so you put yourself in your own shoes. It can be a little bit more simple than we expect at times. So that's a very good point. Dr. Roper, do you have any additional comments on that? Any soft skills and maybe how you would go about?
No, to be honest, I was trying to put my mute on to get ahead of Katrina, but she answered perfectly, which is why we have teaching events at ICMS without wishing to be a salesman. I think the notion of observation and utilizing this time now is really important. So I imagine people would know themselves what they need to improve on, what they feel they need to improve on. And the beauty is hopefully with the time that they have or the time that they've had, and the prevalence of webinars like this and different ones, TED Talks, different stuff out there, that would be very useful as well. Again, I can say what we can provide, but I don't want to be the salesman, so I'm not going to go there.
And William, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll be the salesman.
I know you love to talk, so I thought I'd save you for the end.
No, I'll be the salesman. For heaven's sakes, if you haven't done a course in risk management, and if this doesn't indicate the importance of doing a course in risk management, then you're crazy, because this, if nothing else, is the biggest example of risk management that you can have for events. Okay, and that's what we teach. That's what we're looking at here. It's not depressing. It's probably the most fascinating course. People love it. And believe it or not, that's what, whoops, I got the wrong figure, but that's what we do at ICMS.
Well, I mean, there's obviously a lot of opportunities for people to get involved with us. So, you know, it would be great to get more people through, and obviously we'll see you in class and the other two here. Obviously tonight when we picked the panel, we tried to pick quite a range. So another question which comes up quite regularly this evening is actually one that surprised me, but people are talking about return on investment and how do you believe that you get, you know, either internally or externally with sponsorship in the events and sports industry. What are, I suppose, the keys in this environment to make sure sponsors and corporate partners still see value, particularly when you don't have 40, 50,000 people turning up to a stadium anymore? Where's the value in that? I mean, obviously you guys all have different backgrounds, so we might sort of go through or answer that in the order of presentation. So William, what's your take?
Oh, I have no idea. No, I agree. I think it's terrible for the sponsors at present. So I'll throw to Katrina. Oops,
Look, I think what we've all learned from in the last few months is that, yes, you know, we are all human and we all have probably a larger range of emotions that we're all willing to admit, and a larger amount of vulnerability. And I think we need to look at return on investment, yes, in monetary terms, whether it's media rights in, you know, while we're enduring that virtual space, still ensuring that also the sponsors have access to various aspects of data, and that they have the communication channels to the attendees. And like I said, with that halo effect of potentially a 6 to 7 week event rather than just a 1 or 2 day event. But the other one is an emotional return on investment. So not just a monetary term, you're actually looking at an emotional return on investment, and that then brings the return on custom to that next event that then is done, or following the road show around the state or around the country. The emotional return on investment, I don't think we can underestimate how big that will be as we go out and start experiencing again something that gives us a smile, or makes us feel strong, or makes us feel supported, or has educated us in a different environment that we're not used to being educated in. I think that in itself is going to be one of the best return on investments.
Yeah, you obviously picked that up a few times in your presentation, talking about the psychology of events and also the experience economy, which I think not many people sort of talk about and think about too much, which is a very unspoken element to the events world. And yeah, you sort of pay it forward, I suppose, and sometimes you can't measure the return on investment, unfortunately, but you sort of know it's there. And some things take a long time. I mean, you know, in a sporting landscape, people become loyal to clubs for 30, 40, 50 years. And that's quite an investment. So yeah, sometimes it takes some time to pay it off. So Dr. Roper, what about from the sporting angle? Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm trying to be positive, but Australia is, I think, one of the toughest markets in the world for sports, for sponsorship, because there are so many different sports and so many different sports that are a very high level. And so it's difficult for different organizations to attract sponsorship, just because there tends to be more organizations than sponsors, or big enough sponsors. It's interesting you picked up on Katrina's notion about the experience economy, because that's huge. And as people who follow our football teams or different codes, it's more than, I mean, sport, again, without trying to sound like I'm preaching, it means an awful lot. And to me, my club's more than my club. It represents my city, represents my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my father, brothers and sisters. So it's a big thing. In terms of trying to break into that, it's difficult. I haven't got a simple answer in a 1 minute. I could do a lecture on it for 3 hours, but I don't want to bore everyone here. But I think just being true to yourself and being true to your fans, especially as Christine said, what we've come out of, I would look for an organization that fitted the models, the high models that I would have. So I mean, that would be the way I'd be looking at stuff. Community-based, very strong, but difficult, honestly. Yeah, difficult.
Can I just say one thing here? You've got to remember, for the last 4 months, people have not been spending money overseas. That means there's a lot of people in Australia who are cash rich. Sure, there's some people who've lost jobs, but they haven't gone on that cruise. They haven't flown over to Paris for a weekend holiday. Believe me, once this thing is turned off and we're allowed to get back together again, the event industry will shoot off, because people will want to get back together. I mean, it's already happening in Bondi. People will want to get back together again, and they'll have the cash to do it, okay? So just keep that in mind, by the way. Don't, you know.
Yeah,
sorry.
That's very good. I thought I saw your
That goes for sponsors too, by the way. Yeah. You know, the sponsors have got the money. They just haven't had anything to spend it on yet. So wait till it happens. Just be prepared.
Yeah, and I think the community element there, which Dr. Roper talked about, that's quite a long-term play as well. So yeah, I definitely agree. The money's there. They're almost just waiting to have something to spend it on. Well, ladies, sorry, go. No, William, yeah, keep going, please.
No, I said I am.
Oh, you are, sure. Well, look, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're almost at time there, and obviously coming up to dinner, and there's still a few questions which we haven't got to this evening, but please don't worry, we'll be collating all these questions, and our panel of experts will be providing an answer for you, and we'll be sending them to you via email. So please keep an eye on your emails. But look, I would like to thank you for joining us this evening. It's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed hearing from our three panelists, and also thank you for your time as well to the three of you. We very much appreciate that, and what is a very busy period. Both of these, also all three of these panelists are all quite heavily involved in our Graduate Certificate of Event Management and our Master of Event Management courses. So if what you've seen tonight is, rekindling that fire, and you've realised it's all not all doom and gloom, because these guys have definitely provided an insight into where it's going, and it looks very positive. make sure you jump onto our website and get the inquiry and application in, because we do have a July course, and also it does run online too. So if you need to fit it around work, you've got some downtime particularly, it can be done. So look, please keep firing through the questions for the next couple of minutes, and then we'll make sure we answer those. We have had a lot of interest for these two courses. I know a few of you here tonight are actually already enrolled in our two courses for event management. So thank you for coming along to get a bit of a sneak peek. You've seen some of your lecturers that you'll be engaging with over the coming months. So I'm glad you got to see that. But look, we look forward to hopefully seeing you shortly, and thank you for a fantastic evening, everyone. And please take care and stay safe and get ready for the rebound. Thank you.